Hi there, everyone. I see we have a few early birds, very on time, as always. While we're waiting to get started, we're going to start at 3 o'clock on the dot, Eastern Europe time. If you would just pop your name and where you're tuning in from in the chat, that would be great, so we know who we're speaking to. Let us know if you're an e-resident already. Let us know if you have a company in Estonia, or other business, and what you're thinking about doing, why you're here today, what questions. Well, maybe don't put your questions in the chat, but just introduce yourselves in the chat now. And and in 1 minute or 1.5 minutes, we'll get started with the formal parts. So yes, someone's asked about a recording. I can already answer this question. This is live streaming on YouTube. And so we'll save the video on YouTube. So you will be able to access a recording of this after we've published. Okay, so we have a few South Americans joining, Brazil, Ecuador. Hello to the person from Jordan.
I noticed we have a nice new Estonian language background too. So if anyone can read that, maybe they get a special prize. But you're not allowed to use your Google Translate app for that one.
We've got a few Estonians on the call now, so they
don't count.
They can be the judges, maybe. Hi, Mark from Singapore. Hello, neighbor in Latvia. So we have a fairly international crowd here. I'm seeing people from almost all continents. So welcome, everyone. All right, so we have 100 people already in the webinar, so I think it's a good time to get started. I'm going to share my screen, and then I'll explain a few things in the introduction. So welcome to our February live Q&A. I'm Hannah, and this is my colleague Alex. We're from the marketing team here at eResidency. Today, we are celebrating our 100th Estonian e-resident application. So it's great that you're joining us on this momentous day. If you have questions already, and I can see that there's one already, but for the rest of you, if you have questions already, please put them in the Q&A tab. You'll see it at the bottom of your screen. Use the chat for networking, talking to people, having a great time. And for those of you who've just come in, yes, there will be a recording. It will be on, this is being live streamed on YouTube, and we'll keep the video up there afterwards. So you'll be able to watch a replay if you want. And you'll also receive a copy of these slides by link tomorrow from Zoom as well. All right, so with those few housekeeping things underway, I think it's time to get started. So firstly, I want to introduce our guests. We have a real life e-resident here. Maya, if you could introduce yourself first.
Yes, certainly. I'm very glad to be here with you, Hannah, and everybody else. And congratulations to Estonian e-Residency on this amazing milestone of 100,000 e-residents. I'm definitely not number 100,000 because I've just renewed my Estonian residency after 5 years. So hopefully I can help with any questions you might have about why anybody would renew it, or why it's a sustainable option which has served me extremely well. I'm a British writer presently living in Spain and working with clients all over the world, including in Estonia. So it's really great to be here today and part of this amazing international community.
Thank you, Maya, for being here. And yeah, Maya also writes for our blog too. So she knows a lot about the ins and outs of e-residency as well. All right, so we have another couple of guests here, Velvo and Alari. Would you like to introduce yourselves, please?
Yes, thank you. Happy to be here. I'm Velvo, my colleague Alari also here. So we are representing accounting company Finance Plus. Finance Plus is a professional accounting company and business consultation company. We have been operating since 2008 already, and it's we know everything about accounting related to Estonian matters, and we provide all our services in English. We have a good contact with e-resident program, and so we are ready to help you where needed, basically. And yeah, today also, if you have any questions and regarding Estonian company setup and the corporate tax and accounting matters, then we are here today to help you.
Great. And we're really happy you're here, Velvo and Alari. The Finance Plus is a member of the eResidency marketplace, which we're going to introduce a little bit later in the presentation. So you'll easily be able to find their contact details on either their website or our marketplace as well. All right. So the presentation today is in 3 parts. The first part is about basics of eResidency, which Alex will take us through. We'll then pause and have questions on on the topic of, what is eResidency. We're then going to do part 2, which is on company formation and business banking. We'll pause, do questions on that. And then we will do part 3 on taxes. I'm sure you're all here waiting for that because it's a big hot topic for us. And we'll answer some questions on that at the end. And then right at the end, I'll give you some further resources to help you further on. But I think with that introduction, let's get started. So Alex is going to take us through the first section.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. As Hannah mentioned, so we have 100,000 e-residents now. I think some of you on this call, on this webinar, are already e-residents. So maybe some of this first part is a little bit old news for you. But for those of you who are still thinking about e-residency, I think it's really good to kind of go over the basics. So part 1 is about what is e-residency. And I think it's good if we talk about what e-residency is and what it's not. So first of all, e-residency at the core is a digital identity issued by the government of Estonia that gives you access to Estonia's e-services and allows you to provide a secure digital signature. This is much more secure than a digital signature that you might use with a third-party private provider or even a signature that you use with a pen and a paper. It's also a digital key to doing business in Estonia. So running your business, setting up your business, of course, and we'll cover all of those in more detail on today's webinar. And I think also, as Maya can probably talk about too, it's a global community. So we mentioned 100,000 people in, I think, 186 countries or something. So a really, truly global community that you can be a part of when you become an e-resident and set up your company here in Estonia. But as I mentioned, I think it's also really important to talk about what e-residency is not. So first of all, it's not a travel document. It doesn't give you a pathway to citizenship, visa, or residency permits in Estonia or the European Union. It's not automatic personal tax residency, and it doesn't automatically give you access to a business bank account or personal bank account. So who can apply for e-residency? First, this is sometimes confusing for people because we're going to talk a lot today about how you use e-residency to register a company in Estonia, but e-residency itself is issued to an individual. So you as an individual apply for e-residency. And you have to have substantial interest in using government services here in Estonia and starting a company. Of course, if I don't think this applies to too many people besides Velvo and Alari, but not open to Estonian citizens or residents of Estonia. And of course, right now, due to a decision by Estonia's parliament last year with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we are currently have restrictions on new applications from Russian and Belarusian citizens. And here's a lovely e-resident here that you can read about on our blog as well. All right, so why should you become an e-resident? First of all, you can register an EU-based company 100% online from anywhere in the world. And when you register that company, you then get to run that company with 24/7 remote and secure access to Estonian e-services. And of course, as we mentioned too, when you get your digital ID card, you can digitally sign documents. And this digital ID card gives you a digital signature with the highest eIDAS standard. This is the European standard for digital signature. So you can be, you can be assured that when you give this signature, that it's secure and people will accept it and trust it. And of course, again, we're going to talk about this a lot, but we really like to talk about the community of e-residency, of e-residents. It's really important. And I think I said 186 countries before. Sorry, maybe not quite that many.
170 plus.
170 plus. Okay, close enough. Yeah. All right, and here's 2 more e-residents too. I think these guys are really unique, and maybe actually some of you would resonate with their story because they're both Americans, but one of them lives in Korea, one of them lives in Switzerland, and they set up their company here in Estonia. This is a really common use case for e-residency. If you have a business partner in another country and you're not sure, where to set up, Estonia could be a really good option for you. So how does it work in terms of the timeline? So first of all, the application is done completely online in about 30 minutes. This is done on Estonia's Police and Border Guard Board websites. Then you're going to have to choose a pickup location because we do need to actually ship the e-Residency digital ID card to one of our embassies or other pickup locations. And there's a state fee for that. It's 100 to 120 euros, depending on which pickup location you choose. And then, of course, after you do your application, the Estonia's Police and Border Guard Board will review the application within 30 days of submission, and just to make sure that all of your information is correct, and that and they might ask you additional questions as well. So after you've been approved for e-Residency, the Police and Border Guard Board will ship your e-Residency digital ID kit, which includes the ID card and the card reader, to the location that you selected on your application. So normally this takes 2 to 5 weeks. So if you're applying from somewhere like, I don't know, Canberra, Australia or something, it takes longer. But if you're applying in Helsinki, then it takes a little bit less time. And of course, then you need to go collect your e-Residency digital ID card in person. But as soon as you have it, then you get immediate access to Estonia's e-services. So the whole process takes about 3 to 8 weeks from the application to arriving at the embassy to pick up your digital ID card. And here's a map of the pickup locations around the world. So we have 45 locations. So the pink ones are locations that we added relatively recently. So this is part of our goal to expand access to e-Residency to more parts of the world. So you might need to travel to a location if there's not one in your current location. And just keep in mind that if you do need to travel, you need the right to travel to those countries, to that country, to pick up your ID card. But if you're in Europe, you can see the coverage is pretty good. So one thing we're really excited about too is that we just launched a new subreddit. So if you're a Redditor here, make sure you join our community. And also, I think it's also a really good place to get more detailed answers for your questions too. So if there's something that I can't answer, that Hannah can't answer, that Velvo or Olari can't answer, put it in the subreddit, and hopefully someone else from the community can answer it.
And you can pick your user flares, so you can say whether you're an e-resident or not, or have a company or not, and that will help us understand your needs. And there is a QR code there, so yeah, take a look at that. I think we do have a lot of people. We have over 200 people on this webinar today, so we're probably not going to get to everyone's question. I'm really sorry, but I just want to manage expectations. But here's your chance. Go on subreddit and ask your questions there as well. All right, so we're going to pause here and take a look in the Q&A tab. While we're having a look, Maya, maybe you could talk a little bit about your renewal experience, because you did mention it in the intro, and I think it's a really helpful thing to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky living in Europe. Obviously, it was extremely straightforward. I had to go up to the Estonian embassy in Madrid. I was also offered the opportunity to pick up on certain days from Barcelona as well. I think it's like a pop-up pickup point that operates certain days. So I just basically had to pick what city I fancied a day trip to. And I went for Madrid because I hadn't been up there for a while. And it was actually very straightforward. I think the whole process end to end took me less than a month, from getting the email pointing out that I had to renew through to doing it. And that included the Estonian border guard having to come back to me and say my photo wasn't adequate. So there was a slight loop in there, which was my fault. I think I recall that the application form was more detailed than it was 5 years ago. Obviously, 5 years is a long time, but I think the world has become more complicated then. There are more sanctioned regimes and money laundering questions and things to go through. But yeah, I'd say half an hour is about right to set aside for just going through and answering all of those questions in detail. And after that, the whole process is very quick. The embassy visit itself was probably less than 10 minutes, extremely straightforward. I had to find it first, tiny little embassy in Madrid. You walk past all the other huge embassies, like the American ones with all the guns outside and things like that. And then you find the Estonian one over a shop, which is a lovely person who just quickly checks your ID, scans your fingerprints again to make sure they haven't changed in 5 years, and then you're out of there with your ID pack in minutes. So it's really incredibly straightforward, just as it was 5 years ago. So nothing to be concerned about.
Thank you. So someone did ask, will the ID card renew automatically? So I think you might just have your answer there. Yeah. So the ID card certificate lasts for 5 years, and then you'll need to renew. You will get a reminder from the Estonian Police and Border Guard, I think 3 months before. before it expires. So you'll know to do that. And then the process is very similar to starting again. And someone else has asked about the process. I think Alex covered that pretty well. But if you have any specific questions about the process, please let us know and we can give you more details. And then I did see someone asks, what is the purpose of the program? Well, the purpose of the program is to enable entrepreneurs all over the world to start a company in Europe and, have access to entrepreneurship. Maybe it's difficult in your own country or it's a little bit complicated. So that's the purpose that is our vision. It's to be the go-to place for entrepreneurs to come and do business here from wherever they are. Obviously, there is an Estonian reason as well. And the Estonian reason is, nearly 10 years ago now, Estonia was looking for a way to bring more investment and more business to a country that is quite small in population and geographically as well. So in that sense, there are advantages for the country as well in terms of financial benefits, cultural benefits, and sort of geopolitical as well in the eyes of the world. So I hope that answered your question about what's the purpose of e-Residency. Okay, I think most of the other questions I'm reading here are company related. So I think maybe it's a good idea to get to part 2.
I think so, yes.
So I'm going to close the Q&A for now. And let's get back to the presentation. So part 2, company formation and business banking as well. Okay, so the first thing to ask is why would you want to start a company in Estonia? And the reason is that you can do it 100% digitally and from anywhere. There are 4 value propositions that we believe make us unique in Estonia and with e-Residency. The first is ease. It's really easy to start a company here. It takes, I think, there's a world record of 15 minutes and 33 seconds made by an e-resident to start to register a company. It's easy to run because of the digital signatures, which Alex talked about before. And we provide you with all the resources and networks and community as well to grow as well. So it's easy to grow. Secondly, Estonia is a very trustworthy business environment. It's part of the EU. It has been since 2004. It uses the euro. And also the digital infrastructure that the country has developed over 30 years is extremely secure, safe, and dependable. Also, the business environment here is extremely transparent, so that we don't want any shady dealings here, and the country does pretty well at keeping them out as well. Thirdly, opportunities. I briefly mentioned this in the first, but having an Estonian company it means you're entering a very, very vibrant startup ecosystem. So there are a lot of VC and angel investors that know Estonia and know Estonian business, so they're more likely to fund your company. You'll find a lot of business partners to work with, not just from the e-resident community, but also from our marketplace, which I'll talk a little bit about soon. And the country also incentivizes innovation. It's very pro-growth. The legislation here is quite thin. It's a low regulation environment. So there's a lot of room for you to grow new products, take some risks, within legal limits, and try something new. Finally, the community. You can lean on a global network of support. People have done this before, so you're not, going to be alone when you start. You can ask questions and you'll get answers from people who've tried and failed and succeeded as well. So e-residents have started since 2014, over 25,000 companies now. So if you like numbers like me, it's quite cool. We have 100,000 e-residents and 25,000 companies. So a quarter have started companies at least. Okay, let's talk about the registration process. So once you have your e-Residency digital ID card, you can start your company essentially. So you will probably choose a business service provider to help you. You'll definitely need one for one service, which is the legal address and contact person service. I'll talk about that in the next slide. But you might also choose a service provider to help you with the registration process and with accounting and things like that as well. So with your digital ID card, you log into the Estonian e-business register. Some service providers also have their own API formation portals or services, and you register your company. And as I said before, the world record to do this is 15 minutes and 33 seconds by an Austrian e-resident. Normally, the average time is about 2 hours. That's data from our e-business register colleagues. So the next thing you'll need to do is you'll need to check if your company needs a license or a notice of economic activity. This is actually not, there are not many areas of activity that do need a license, but similar to other countries, things like financial services, which includes crypto, education, construction, tourism, these types of activities, you might need to do something a little extra other than just register your company. And finally, once you have that done, you can apply for a business banking account. And I will cover this in more detail in a few slides' time. So I mentioned the e-Residency marketplace a few times. This is what it looks like, and you'll find it on our website. It's a business directory of 122 expert service providers on the e-Residency marketplace. They can help you with their business, and many of them can provide this mandatory local service I mentioned before, which is the local contact person. So this is a mandatory service for Estonian companies where the management board is located overseas. So if your foreign management board, if your management board address is foreign, you'll need to have an Estonian local contact person to help you. They have to be a certain type of professional, I think notaries or lawyers, accountants, these types of people, or they can have a special license to do it. And they don't have any liability for your company. They simply act as an address, as a mailbox and a messenger service in Estonia. And they're essentially there so that regulatory authorities in Estonia can find someone local to communicate about your business. They're not a local director either. In some countries, you can have these shadow directors, local non-executive directors. They're not this. It's not the same thing. This is actually not something that you can do in Estonia. So the marketplace also contains providers of other services, as I mentioned, company formation, accounting, legal, tax consulting, etc. And Finance Plus is on the marketplace, so you can find them there. I did a tutorial video, it's up on YouTube. So if you want to know how to use some of the features, there's filtering features, compare, there's rating and review features on the marketplace. It's about, I think, a 20-minute video. So that might help you get started looking at that and finding the best partners for your business. Okay, the next thing I'll talk about is costs, because this is something that everyone always asks about. So Alex mentioned the state fee for an e-Residency application, which is either 100 or 120 euros, depending on where you pick up your card. Some service, the private service points, those pink ones on the map, if you remember, they charge an extra fee in cash on when you pick up the card. So that's why the fee here is slightly different, just so you know. The state fee to register an OU company, which is a private limited company in Estonia, is 265 euros. The local contact person service that I mentioned, the mandatory service, you can find a service provider to help you with this somewhere in the range of 200 to 400 or upwards per year, euros per year. Accounting in Estonia, you can find an accountant, maybe if you're a freelancer or a solopreneur with only a few client invoices a month, you might find an accountant who can help you starting at 50 euros per month. You can also, there's also many service providers that offer packages. So these are just, the costs I'm putting here are the very basic low costs that you can find, but there are a range of costs depending on the service providers on our marketplace. When you're budgeting for your first year startup costs, there are also other things to think about. So think about if you do have to travel to the pickup location to pick up your card, you might have some costs associated with that. If you get any extra services, legal, tax consulting, that will be more. But some traditional banks and also even some fintechs, although less so, will charge you some fees for doing banking. And then also if you get business licenses, software licenses, these types of things, that's extra costs to think about in your first year of doing business. So starting, I've sort of done some like very, back of the hand sums here for indicating how much you might expect to outlay. If you're doing everything yourself, DIY, where all you are is an Estonian e-resident with a company, with a local contact person, and then you'll do all the accounting and everything yourself, can expect to pay starting at €565 for the year. If you get a basic accountant to help you in that first year, you're looking more over €1,000 for the first year in outlay. So I mentioned this OU. It's the most popular business form in Estonia. It's also the most popular business form amongst e-residents. I think like 98% of e-residents have an OU. It's suitable for shareholders, one shareholder or more. So like Ian and Luke that Alex spoke about earlier in the presentation, co-founders, they started an OU themselves. Recently, there was a change in the law here in Estonia. So the minimum share capital is now as low as €1 per shareholder. One of the best advantages of an OU, and I'm going to ask you about this, Maya, when we get there, but is the fact that an OU limits shareholder liability. This is quite a strong advantage for many, particularly solopreneurs and freelancers. And also, it's an easy registration process, as I showed you. So we're going to very briefly talk about banking, and then we're going to go to questions. So there are 3 options for e-residents to open a business bank account for their companies. The first, and by far away the best and easiest option, is to use a fintech, also known as a neobank or a payment institution. They must be located in an European Economic Area country. The main advantage for using a fintech is that it can be opened entirely online. So if you're a digital nomad or location independent, or you're nowhere near Europe or Estonia, this will be the best way to go for you. There's a very wide choice, and in the next slide, I'll show you some of the choices that e-residents can choose from. The only disadvantage really, or one of the big disadvantages though, is that they can't provide business loans as they're not credit institutions. The second option for e-residents are banks in other European Economic Area countries. And this is actually a really good option if you already have a business in another country in Europe and you already have a business bank account with, say, a traditional bank account in, say, Portugal, for example, for your Portuguese business. You have an existing client relationship, a good one, and you say to them, look, I'm opening an Estonian company as well. Would it be okay to have another account for my Estonian company? And this is possible. We know this happens. We did a banking survey a couple of years ago, and I think nearly 20% of people said that they had successfully used this option. So this is something that you might consider if you do have a good client relationship with an existing bank. The third option are banks in Estonia. So these are the traditional banks, the brick and mortar ones. They require companies to have a strong connection to Estonia. And a strong connection to Estonia means at least 50% of your business needs to be in Estonia, whether that be clients, suppliers, assets, these kinds of things. That can be quite a high bar for many e-residents. It is possible. I know that Maya, for example, has a traditional bank account with an Estonian bank. So it is possible that e-residents can do that. So that's something maybe as well she can talk about in a minute about some of the things that they asked her about that. The other disadvantage for opening an account with an Estonian bank is that you do require to make a personal visit to the bank. So you will need to come to Estonia at least once to authenticate yourself. So I mentioned that I'd give you an idea of the choice. So these are all the Estonian traditional banks and fintechs on our marketplace. They all know what e-residency is. They all have e-resident clients. So you can have a look at this range and find something that works for you and your business. You'll notice the first two are the Estonian traditional banks, LHV and Co-op. They do have e-resident clients. They did a webinar with us last year, actually, so you can look out for that on our YouTube channel because they talk a lot about their onboarding criteria, and they did a Q&A with us as well. The next two, Airwallex and WeTrust, are fintechs with Estonian IBANs. So if you need an Estonian IBAN, because maybe you're on like Google Play Store or app stores or selling ads, these kinds of marketplaces, and they require you to have the same IBAN as your company, which actually is not like they shouldn't do that, but they do in practice. Maybe WeTrust or Airwallex are for you, and then the rest have various good and bad things about them. Well, all of them, of course. So you need to do your due diligence to find out what works best for you and your business. So I recently put together this comparison table. I'm not going to go through it in detail. As I said, you will get a copy of these slides, so you can have a look more closely when you get them. There are just 3 things I want to point out. So the time to register a business in Estonia is 2 hours compared to, and this is, by the way, this is for foreigners, so people outside the country starting a company in another country. So in US, you're looking at 5 to 15 business days. In Ireland, 3 to 7 business days. In the UK, I think it says on the official government website 24 hours, but I've heard that it can be much less as well. They're fairly quick. The second thing I wanted to point out is that in Estonia, if you're an e-resident, you don't need any visa, local agent, or director to start a company. In the US, you do need a local agent. They can be quite expensive, I've heard as well. In Ireland, that's Delaware. That's Delaware State, by the way. In Ireland, you need at least one director of your company to be from the European Economic Area. The UK is similar to Estonia for this as well. And finally, with your digital ID card as an e-resident, you can do your company formation fully online. Whereas in Delaware and Ireland, it's only partially, because you do need to have some paper documents uploaded as well. So those are just a few things I wanted to point out. But as I said, you'll get a copy of these slides so you can go through this in more detail. And I do have a series of blog posts on the eResidency blog covering comparisons of Estonia with these 3 countries in more detail. And there are more coming as well. Okay, before we get to questions, one little plug. So at the moment, we are running a campaign for Ukrainian citizens. If you become an e-resident and start a company, we will reimburse e-Residency. The Estonian government will reimburse the application fee for e-Residency. And there are, I think, 8 or 9 service providers on our marketplace who will reimburse the company state fee. So it's not a lot, but it's hopefully a little bit for you to help you get started if you're looking for another way to make some money at the moment in these difficult times. All right. I can see there are a lot of questions in the Q&A.
Actually, I'll give Hannah a breather here. And I see there's one question. It came up maybe twice or maybe more. Question is about registering multiple companies with e-Residency. And the answer is yes, you can register multiple limited liability companies as an e-resident. But the other thing to keep in mind is that in Estonia, you might not need to. You can actually run different businesses through the same company. So when you register your company, it's going to ask you for the main area of activity. So you're going to have to list that when you register the company. But I know in some countries, in some jurisdictions, they require you to have a new company for each sort of activity. But in Estonia, it's much more flexible.
So, Velvo, have you been looking in the Q&A? Are there any questions that stand out to you that you'd like to answer?
Actually,
here?
I was thinking also maybe to just provide further explanations regarding company setup. Also.
Sure.
That would be really helpful.
There was the indication like 2 hours to set up online, and the share capital input like 1 cent. I think actually the better understanding is that actually it's possible to set up the company quite quickly. Yeah, I would say even 1 hour indication is quite accurate. If you have if you have a support also from Estonian side, somebody is advising. But the easiest way to set up the company is also to set up the company without making the initial share capital input, because then the process is much more easier, and you don't need to handle the bank account opening right away. So basically, this gives you the time advantages, and by the end, it's still good to follow that the share capital input should reach to 2,500 euro over 1 year time period. So that's still, I think it's better to understand that this 2,500 euro is still the share capital input which should be considered, but the setup is still basically without, it's possible without making the share capital input right away. So then, and this way the setup process is, yes, is very, very quick. So that's one comment regarding the setup. And also the bank account opening matter, then for example, LHV, our local bank, yes, they are the best traditional bank to approach if you want to open a classical bank account. And they are, I would say, still quite flexible if you are able to explain to them what is your target or what you want to achieve in Estonia, that you in the future, for example, you will have clients here, and they accept also basically emails to show that how you want to set up your business in Estonia and what would be your business plan and so on. But the only thing to consider is that the fees they apply are quite high. It's like 30 euro per month, and they charge for companies owned by non-residents. And also the account opening fee is 300 euro. But LHV is, yeah, as a classical bank, I would say that all our clients, e-resident clients, more or less, they try to speak with LHV. So this is my experience, and yeah, and then that's
Thank
it.
you. Yeah, and Maya, maybe that's a good segue, because I know you have an account with LHV.
Yes, I do. And again, I opened it 5 years ago, so the situation was probably a bit different then. It did involve me a trip to Estonia, but I wanted to come anyway. And it's the experience has been fine. There are quite high monthly fees, but it is exceptionally useful to have access to the credit card, to have access to their investment products as well. I do have a Wise account too, though, which is useful when you're billing people not in euros. It's just particularly with US clients or anything, just to be able to stick the bank details that they recognize on your invoice. Makes a big difference. It shouldn't be an obstacle to getting paid quickly anyway. So it's best to have a multi-currency account option too.
Yeah, that's actually something that we've seen with other e-residents as well. Many have multiple accounts for exactly that reason, because they are working globally. So thanks for mentioning that.
You know, Edward is asking here that he understands he still needs to visit Estonia to sign documents and manage the company. But Edward, you don't actually. We'd love to have you here, but you don't need to come here. Once you have your digital ID card, then you can manage your company, sign your documents without visiting Estonia. So the only thing we're talking about here to visit Estonia is if you want to open a traditional business bank account, then you would need to come here. What Maya and Velvo were just talking about. Well, otherwise, come here if you want, but no need to otherwise.
And even then, I would say it's a one-day trip, more or less. That just this KYC check in bank, and then they will make the passport copy, and the rest of the things you can do online. I mean, for example, talking about LHV, then they have a very good online bank. And they have also very good client service that you can do basically everything from distance afterwards.
Yeah, they ship replacement cards internationally as well. You don't need to travel when your card expires or anything like that with the bank.
So Hitesh is asking about stock trading. So can I open a bank account and also stock trading account remotely? Can I trade in futures options?
There's a few questions with that too.
Yeah. Velvo, is this something that you help your clients with?
Let me think, what was the exact question? That stop trading?
Yeah, so they want, basically, I think they want to, I mean, from experience, I know there are a few different ways of doing this, but it is possible to start an Estonian company and then get a bank account either with a traditional bank or even a fintech, and then sign up for, say, like interactive brokers, or there's an Estonian one called Lightyear, for example, and you can trade that way. So that is possible. Yes, you can do that with your Estonian company.
Yeah, I think so. It's possible, yeah.
So quite a few people are just asking about like one-person companies or Can I have multi-founders? And I think we did cover that in the slides, but just to reiterate, this private limited company, this OU, you can be a one-person company, a solopreneur like Maya is, and she actually does write on this topic quite a lot, particularly on our blog. Or you can be multi-founders. So you can be located in the same country or different countries and set up your company together. And I did see someone asking about if, what if someone's not an e-resident? It's possible, but it's more annoying. Velvo, do you want to talk about that? Because then they'll need a notary and they might need to visit.
Yeah, I mean that the setup is then different, and you don't have a chance to have online setup then, or you will, if without the resident card, then the notary meeting is needed, and then basically the setup process is different. Without e-resident card, then the standard case is that company setup will be done in the notary office in Estonia. There are some alternatives while having a power of attorney, for example. Notarized apostille power of attorney could also help in this case. For example, Finance Plus could then represent the founder, but still, it's the setup process is still different. And also, one thing to note is that the company founders should be still private persons. I think quite many. I can see that many cases. I can see that later on, when the client have e-resident card, then they still want to use it while they have a foreign company as a founder. So then it doesn't work. Also then. So it's also always linked to the private person as a founder when you have an e-resident card.
Okay. Are there any? Someone's asking if Europe includes the UK for companies. So your company will be an Estonian company, which is part of the European Union. And sadly, for both Maya and I, who are British passport holders, Great Britain, United Kingdom is no longer in the European Union. So it is separate. Are there any more questions? Otherwise, I think we should move on to taxes. Because I can see a lot of questions about taxes.
Yeah, I think we can move on and go through the next section. Yep.
Okay. Okay, so part 3, taxation. And particularly here, we're talking about cross-border taxation. So just as a general overview, what are some of the taxes you need to be aware of as a company founder? The first one is your own personal taxes, individual taxes, what you get from your salary, from rent, these kinds of things. Generally speaking, you will declare this. You will continue to declare this in your country of tax residence. And this is because e-residency does not change your individual tax residency, as we mentioned at the beginning. The second type of taxes are company taxes, corporate income taxes. So generally speaking, these will be declared where the company is tax resident or it has a permanent establishment or another, another assumption of tax residency in another country. And I will talk a little bit more about this in the next slide. The third type of taxes are payroll taxes and social contributions. These are also known as pension, superannuation, labor taxes, social taxes. And you'll declare these where your employees are located or registered. And this includes you. So if you're paying yourself if you're a solopreneur of your own, like one person founder of your own company, and also the sole employee, you pay yourself a salary, make sure that you register yourself in the country where you are and pay the necessary payroll taxes and contributions there. And finally, VAT. Now, this is a topic where we could do an entire webinar just on this topic. So this is a very, 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 this is guidance. And I think Alari can probably maybe elaborate a little bit more when we get to the Q&A. But because of the European Union having a few schemes to try and streamline VAT, the guiding rule at the moment is that online sellers can declare VAT in the EU country where they are VAT registered. There are exceptions here, and this is a very broad rule with lots of exceptions. So don't take it as completely gospel, but it might help you when you think about VAT, where you're going to be registering and where you're going to be declaring. So I mentioned that I would talk more about company taxes. So here is an insight into my brain, this slide. So the first thing to note is that Estonian companies, when they're registered, are automatically registered as tax residents in Estonia by the Estonian Tax and Customs Board, which is the regulatory authority for taxes here in Estonia. But there are two conditions here that are really important to note. If your company, your Estonian company, is also considered a tax resident, or its activities create a permanent establishment in another country, for example, the country where you live and do business, your company may also have tax liabilities there. The other thing is that e-Residency is not tax residency, and it won't exempt your company from these dual tax residency or foreign tax liabilities. But don't worry, because Estonia has signed over 60 double tax avoidance agreements. So generally speaking, if there is a good argument that your company should be paying tax in the country where you live, Estonia will exempt taxes here in Estonia. So this is something that you should definitely talk to an expert about, like Alari, for example. And you should not be double taxed, but it might just take a little bit of structuring and work to figure out how best to work through this in your situation. Estonia itself has been ranked #1, having the most competitive tax code in the world. It has minimal tax regulation and pretty low rates, comparatively speaking. So there's actually no annual corporate income tax like some other jurisdictions have. Instead, the taxes are paid on distributed profits, so things like dividends, for example. The standard rate is 20%. And that reduces to 14% if you pay continuous dividends over a 3-year period or more. VAT is a standard 20% here in Estonia, and you have to register for VAT if you reach 40,000 euros per year in in revenue. And I mentioned these, streamlined schemes in the EU for VAT. They're known as the OSS, or the one-stop shop, and the import OSS, import one-stop shop regimes. And they were brought in a couple of years ago to try and reduce the red tape and bureaucracy surrounding VAT, doing VAT in every single European country. So those can help you a lot as well if you're selling online. Taxes can be declared in Estonia and paid online very quickly. It's tax season at the moment, and everyone's doing it very quickly and not very much time at all at the moment. So it's quite interesting to see as a foreigner here. The Estonian Tax Board is extremely friendly and extremely responsive. They have a dedicated email for non-resident taxpayers in Estonia. So, and they normally answer within a few hours. I think they say 48 hours, but it's normally within a few hours. So if you have any questions about Estonian taxes, they are very helpful and will help you with that. And as I said, Estonia has been #1 on the Tax Competitiveness Index, and that is now 9 years running. So I've just talked about all the lovely benefits of Estonian taxes. So how could you actually pay them? Because as we sort of heard before, it might be difficult if you do live in another country. So there are ways to do this, and we call this having substance, your company having substance in Estonia. So apart from moving here, for example, there are ways that you could structure your business and therefore have more of an argument that you have activities here and pay taxes here. So for example, if you rent an office for your company here, if you hire employees in Estonia, if you hold your board meetings here, so you do travel here maybe once, twice a year and make all the important strategic decisions in Estonia around your business. If you register assets and intellectual property in Estonia, this is also a good argument for you to pay taxes here. Digital nomads, I did see someone asking about this actually. If you don't have a tax residency, then you have a pretty good argument for paying corporate taxes here in Estonia. Relocation is obviously an option if you can get a visa, or if you're European, where it's much more easy to come here. That will help you pay taxes here. Obviously, that's not necessarily a choice that everyone wants to make, but I think it's important to note that you are welcome. If you want more information on any of these topics, there is a link here, which you'll find when you get the slides tomorrow as well. And these are some Ukrainian e-residents, Alexander and Natalia of prnews.io, which is a sponsored news marketplace, PR marketplace. They moved to Estonia a few years ago, originally, I think, on the startup visa, and then they're now permanent residents. And they've lived here now a few years, and they continue to run PR News here in Estonia. So we will go to the Q&A. I hope that Velvo and Alari, you have some good questions to answer here.
Just maybe I can make some comments.
Sure, absolutely.
Slides. Just that basically when you have a communication with the tax authorities, for example, if you will, anyway, they are good in English. They have a very good online support. That's why you have always a chance to have a direct contact with them. But basically, if you will set up Estonian company and you will be client of Finance Plus, then actually communication with tax authorities will be managed from our side. So I mean that basically I think that our clients usually they don't have a direct contact with tax authorities as it's not needed. So then we will manage these things directly, and then so that I don't see a reason why you should have a contact with tax authorities actually, besides to give a power of attorney to us to represent your company in Estonia, and we will submit all declarations online, and we will also have a daily communication with them, so that these things will be handled by our side.
And Velvo, I'm seeing quite a few people asking about what are the sort of reports? What is there something I need to do monthly or annually?
Obligations.
Yeah,
it depends basically how your business is operating. If your company is not VAT registered, if your company doesn't pay any salary, any dividends, then there is only an annual report which should be submitted once in a year to commercial registry. So that's your only obligation. But if you're a VAT payer and if you pay salary or dividends, then basically it means that you should have a monthly accounting, and then declarations also on a monthly basis. VAT declaration and the social income tax declaration. So, but it depends basically. It could be also that if you have a one-man company, then once in a year annual report, and that's it.
Yeah, maybe Maya can jump in here too, not on taxes alone, but on administrative burden. Have you found the administrative burden really high in Estonia, or
no? That's why I'm there.
Been?
That's why I've stuck around for 5 years, because I've run a limited company in Spain before, and I wouldn't do that again by choice, I must say. The operation in Estonia is very straightforward. But look, I'm a journalist and content creator. I really don't know or want anything to do with my business taxes, which is why I use a marketplace provider. And every time I need to pay something or do something, they send me a polite email saying, go in and approve this VAT payment, or this is what you need to do for your annual report. And I do it because what I want to outsource is having to think or worry about any of that. So I'm really glad that all just goes away. Whereas in Spain, they sort of expect you to guess and figure it out for yourself and then fine you anyway when it goes wrong. So it's a lot more complicated. Estonia just kind of makes the admin friction as low as possible. So that's why one of the reasons it works so well for me.
Thank you. Velvo and Alari, I think the one thing a lot of people, when they're thinking about setting up a company, especially registering a company overseas and abroad somewhere, taxes are a big question mark for them, and it can be scary. Maybe they've never worked with a tax advisor before. Mm-hmm. So could you give some advice for people if they have that question? What can they do? Should they reach out to you, set up a consultation, or how can they work with you to kind of get some clarity on those tax questions?
Yeah, I think that if there is a specific questions, then it is better to send basically email to us, to our company, and then we can come back to you. But yeah, I mean, the tax matters, they're always different. So it's
sure.
Maybe it's case by case to check. So it's just one thing, maybe also regarding taxes, that in Estonia, generally we have a very simple tax rules, and the corporate tax system is also very attractive, as you only pay tax when you distribute the profit. But one thing is to consider is that actually social tax is quite high in Estonia. So then 33% on the top of the gross salary. So basically, if you have your business idea is to have employees in Estonia, and and then to pay salary to them, then actually the salary budget is still quite big in Estonia. So that's maybe one problem, I would say. But yeah, just one thing to consider. That yeah, the corporate tax is very attractive, but the salary taxes is still something to consider, that we have a still high social tax here, 33%.
Velvo, there are a few people asking for your contact details, so maybe you could put your website into the chat or something, so people can find a way to contact.
Alari will put it then.
Okay, great.
So then they can reach
Fantastic.
us. Yes.
And I just want to make a clarification to Anthony. Yes, your eagle eye noticed that the 200 euros is different from 565. So in the DIY, I included the cost of e-resident and starting a company fees, whereas in the country comparison slide, I separated them out. That's why. I promise you, that's why. But it's interesting that you noticed it. So maybe I need to rethink how I do the slide. Thank you.
You know, there's a couple of questions here. Think back to a long time ago, like 45 minutes ago, when we were talking about what e-residency is not. I mentioned that e-residency is not a residency permit or a visa, but people are asking about, you know, if you want to move to Estonia. So there are some options that we could just cover quickly. Hannah mentioned it. There's one thing called the startup visa. So if you have a startup idea that's a scalable idea, you would like to actually physically move to Estonia and with you and your family and maybe even some of your team that you want to build this company with, you can apply for the startup visa and do that. There's another program called the digital nomad visa, where if you either work or are a contractor for a company outside of Estonia, or your Estonian company primarily serves clients outside of Estonia, then you can also apply for a digital nomad visa. So if you do want to come here and you need that visa support, there are a couple of different programs that you can look into. What else?
Maya, are you seeing any questions or comments that you'd like to address?
There were some questions about community that came up earlier. And I think it's important to stress that you are part of a movement of 100,000 people as an e-resident now. But there are various social media accounts. There's the blog that Hannah manages. There's events like this. I do find that it's a very welcoming community. You can always get answers to questions. There's always somebody who's been in a similar position to you. There's the Discord. There's I can see that I'm going to have to delve back into Reddit, which I thought I'd left ages ago. I hate Reddit, but obviously the e-resident part of it will be lovely. So I'm looking forward to getting back in there, because I do talk to a lot of e-residents to create the content that I make for Hannah and other people, and for our podcast, The Future is Freelance. So please come along and follow there. That's all we're part of a movement of new ways of doing business on a global basis. So I think you'll find that questions get asked and answered, and it's a really friendly, maybe because it's so global, there's very much a sense of abundance and lack of competitiveness as well. People are always ready to help each other out within e-residency, I find, which is really lovely.
Yeah, and speaking
can I just add also one comment?
Go ahead.
To understand that for us as Estonians, maybe we don't put so much attention anymore, but if we have now that, you know, people listening from different countries at the moment, and Estonia is fully digital, it means that basically in Estonia, we don't have any more classical signature on the paper. I would say that all the businesses are operating here with digital signature. So that if you have a e-resident card, then one thing is that you can communicate with state authorities like tax authorities and, for example, even with banks, but also the local businesses here. All your client relations will be based on digital signature, so that you can do all the things abroad, basically, whatever you want to do or sign regarding Estonia. So we are, I would say that 95% digital this way, that there is no requirements to sign papers, hard copies, like we still have some other countries I know that they still ask stamps, which is usually Estonians, they always are very surprised that if you have a requirement that please send us paper copy with a signature and stamp, because then in Estonia with companies usually they don't have a stamp anymore. So it's these things that you just understand that basically you will have access to fully digital market, I would say. And then it's a little bit different concept to think how to run your business. That it's not just, the tax authorities and the banks, that the general market is operating digitally. So this is just one comment from my side.
Thanks, Velvo. Yeah, it's good to always hear this from Estonians because
I very
we've been
often,
living it.
I'm very often here to surprise when we will get the new clients, e-residents, then they are so surprised when they really understand how it works here.
Yeah.
It's they don't even, maybe very often they don't even realize that how digital it is. That we have also, these e-notary meetings and stuff like that, that you can still later on, you can do many transactions abroad. You don't need to come to Estonia. We have this basically, that you can sell and transfer your assets even without coming to Estonia, which is, I would say it's very unusual if you're not Estonian.
There's a couple of questions here, Hannah, about creating a foundation or a nonprofit. You mentioned that the OU, the private limited, was the most popular business form, but we do have e-Residency who set up nonprofits too as well.
We do. They're called MTUs. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong to the Estonians. And we actually recently published a guide to setting up an MTU on our blog. So I don't have access to my laptop at the moment because I've got the webinar going, but maybe one of my colleagues who's moderating can find the link and add it into the chat or into the Q&A. And it has a really detailed, it has a really nice detailed step-by-step guide to doing that. Velvo, I don't know if you have any clients who set up not-for-profits in Estonia, but it seems to be a topic that's growing for us as well.
We have, but it's still not so common, I guess, because due to our corporate tax system also, I guess, this is the way of thinking is maybe a little bit different. And then having this non-profit organization is maybe, not so needed so often. But the setup process is still quite similar. You do it, just, this basically there are some things a little bit different, or the purpose of the organization is maybe, main thing, that why you want to set up this non-profit organization, because, you're not profitable. So there is some other things you want to do, basically, but still online setup is still possible. So it's, but I would say that in our office, at least, we don't have a e-residents who have tried to set up MTU, non-profit organization. So I would say still that it's not so common.
No, I agree. I think it's less obviously less than the OUs, but we do get the questions every webinar from a few people asking about it. So yeah. So we're actually out of time, unless there are any burning questions that you can see there that you'd like to answer. As I mentioned at the beginning, we did have over 200 people in the webinar today. So I think we've answered about well over 80 questions. So we've done pretty well. But if you didn't get an answer to your question, please feel free to go on the new Reddit, which I mentioned earlier today. Or you can also contact our support team. And on this slide, I will give you the email. There it is. There's the support email. I've also provided a few other links here. So, for example, if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, you can do that on our website. And if you want to apply for e-Residency, the link to the application page is there as well. And finally, after you leave the webinar, a survey will pop up. We will be really, really grateful if you could give us your feedback, because we really do read it and we try and improve these webinars every month. For example, Maya being here today, having an e-resident on the webinar is something that was direct from feedback from last year's live Q&A. So I hope that it's been helpful for you to have an e-resident here. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you, Maya, for being here.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. It is a community, as I said, so it's great to be part of it. And I'm always happy to connect with e-residents as well. You can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. Anything with my name on it is me, basically. So,
and I also want to thank, with my biggest heart, Velvo and Alari for being here and answering so many great questions. So thank you guys. And yeah, as we mentioned at the beginning, you can find them on the marketplace. If you have any further questions or are thinking that they might be good business partners for your company in Estonia.
All questions very welcome. We are waiting. So yeah.
Fantastic.
Do not hesitate to contact us. So
fantastic. And I think thank you, Alex, for joining me, for helping me, giving me a break from speaking too much. And finally, thank you everyone for joining. We had a big participation today. So it was quite chaotic. I hope you found out some new information, and I hope we gave you some good answers to your questions. So thank you and have a really great day.